People who grew up rich, but turned out poor. What is your story? My dad owned several very successful radio stations, then sold them all for several million, while all the mega media companies were buying them up. We lived very comfortably for a while with a nice house and a vacation home right on the slopes of a major Colorado ski resort. He married a gold digger. Unfortunately, he bought it all with money that relied on tech stocks. Then the bubble burst. We lost everything. He tried to sue his broker for bad advice, but only won about $200K. He then declared bankruptcy and lost everything again. Our house sold for half of its worth. I have no idea what happened to the vacation home, but I assume something similar. His wife divorced him. My dad, brother, and I all split up to try to make it on our own. He ended up couch surfing with my mom's family while he got a real estate license. He is still paying alimony. My brother and I put ourselves through school and we both have reasonable jobs now and are doing alright. Quite a story. I think it's good to learn these lessons early. My lawyer dad had a partner and they made great money for years. When I was 12, my dad went on his own and lost everything. Bankruptcy and divorce followed. A terrifying experience. We could no longer afford anything, but maybe it was all for the better. Instead of being spoiled brats, all 4 of us kids put ourselves through school and all did fine. We are still doing okay. I agree. I was well on my way to being a spoiled rich kid who expected everything to be handed to him. This was a huge wake-up call on how things actually are. Even with everything that happened, I still consider us pretty fortunate. We had family and friends that we were able to lean on to get by and help us all get on our feet. A lot of people don't have that. My grandparents were very wealthy, so they bought my parents a house and basically supported my family, even paying for my school tuition. I wasn't aware of this. Because of this, my parents were lazy and never really had jobs. They were always at home, and I didn't find any of this unusual. We had extravagant vacations and I remember being given everything I'd ever asked for. But my grandpa died when I was about 10. Grandma following suit soon after, and all his kids started fighting over the money. I'm pretty sure they're still fighting. Anyway, soon half the lights in our house didn't work, our TVs were all broken, and our cars broken down and barely usable. I was wearing the same uniform all throughout high school, and as a teenager I wore nothing but hand-me-downs. My allowance decreased instead of increased year by year. There were no more vacations. But my parents wasted the rest of their savings on appearing rich, buying fancy jewelry and clothes for themselves and shit, racking up credit card debt. Then they'd host parties for friends in expensive restaurants and I'd feel so angry because back home we'd be eating nothing but canned food. It honestly scarred me so much that my only goal is to become financially stable, and I plan to stay employed without ever retiring because I don't want to be like them, jobless and stupid. Ironically, they've probably taught you financial responsibility really well, despite not understanding it themselves. I grew up rich. I wouldn't say I'm poor, but I don't live near as well as my parents. I grew up in a house, which Zillow has now valued at $5 million in a very wealthy area. My mom never worked. My dad had an office and employees, and besides my mom, 3 ex-wives. My grandmother and great-grandfather came from extreme wealth. And really, it just turned out that my dad, though he was pretending for years to run a business, have an office, and be a big important person, never actually made any money. All of it was drawn from a trust that had been set aside for him, and finally when it went dry, it was over. When my parents passed I inherited about $13,000. Man, that's life. I have 2 siblings that roam the earth thinking there's still something they can capitalize on from all this, some privileged bank of connections they can make withdrawals from. But I've accepted that I'm just ordinary folk. Life doesn't owe me anything. I feel like my sister is the same. She acts like there is some privileged pinata that's going to bust open for her one day soon, and it's tragic. She hasn't taken responsibility for her finances yet, and she's 50 with 2 kids. It's become really divisive inside the family. My dad had a stroke, and the complications from that, the medical bills, and my mother becoming his caretaker led us to eventual homelessness over the course of 5 years. This was in the late 90s/early 2000s. By the time I was 18 we had almost no assets because of medical costs. I became a teacher and am now lower middle class and working toward middle class. My wife works for a non-profit which helps people attain financial stability. AHH, the American dream. Similar story. Both from upper middle class professional families, well on our way to a comfortable life, 3 kids and a house. One of our kids became seriously disabled, medical attention every day, and a couple years later, my husband basically had a nervous breakdown and became almost non-functional. I had switched to part-time when our child was diagnosed. Managing his therapies is a full-time job in itself, and have not been able to find full-time work since my husband's breakdown led to him being unable to work. So I work 2 part-time jobs plus a side hustle, do all the housework in childcare, and care for 2 disabled family members. Use the last of our savings to move closer to my family so I can get at least some help, and the job market is better here. With the coronavirus, I'm terrified. I was already struggling to find something full-time. Thanks for listening to Reddward. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Let us know in comments what you think. Bye.